name is Susan Finelli, and I am your host and author of Behind the Shadows, a program where we go behind the shadows of what meets the eye. Today, we will be going behind the shadows of workplace bullying. And our very special returning guest tonight is Richard Cohen. Richard is a partner at the national law firm of Fox Rothschilds. Richard, welcome to Behind the Shadows.
Thank you, Susan. I'm very happy to be back again.
It's my pleasure to have you. My audience really appreciates your shows, and so that's why I keep bringing you back.
Well, thank you.
And I'd like you to tell our audience a little bit about your practice.
I'm a litigator, trial lawyer. I've been doing this for more than 35 years, and I have a particular interest in employment law, employment discrimination law, and I write a blog from the firm's blogosphere about employment discrimination law, and I have close to 200,000 readers a year, so I really enjoy mixing it up with the readers on this blog.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I understand. You know, today's topic, it's a hot topic. We hear about it in the news all the time. And several months ago when I was talking to one of my crew members about you coming back, and it's Will, and he asked, well, what is Rich going to talk about? And I said, workplace bullying. And it's interesting because he said, and I'm going to quote it, he said, well, I guess it can happen to anyone. So, because usually we hear about it in schools, you know, in cyberbullying, but, you know, and then all of a sudden it pops up that there's workplace bullying. So, there's a Workplace Bullying Institute, and I want to read a quote of their definition of bullying, and then we'll talk about it, okay? So, quote, workplace bullying is repeated health-harming mistreatment of one or more persons, the targets, by one or more perpetrators that takes one or more of the following forms. And then we'll go into the forms of bullying. But when you and I were discussing the show, you had mentioned, well, there's no law, so therefore no legal definition of bullying. Correct? So
Correct.
Talk about that.
Sure. Although it's kind of a distressing topic, bullying is a very exciting topic now because, as you say, it's a hot topic. It's a hot topic both in the workplace and in other spheres, such as education. New York State just recently passed a anti-cyberbullying statute, which was just upheld by a court, I think it was yesterday, I just noted, to prevent bullying in the workplace, in schools. Mm-hmm. And I think bullying starts in the playground, starts when you're a child, goes up through the workplace, and it can last in every aspect of life, from birth to death.
You know, I never kind of put it together, but you know, I've been in the workplace a very long time, and when we were starting to think about putting the show together, I was thinking about experiences that I had witnessed in the workplace over the last 30 or so years. And indeed, I did witness bullying, but it was never identified as such, bullying.
Right. I dare say that all of us have witnessed bullying. Mm-hmm. Surveys recently have shown that 3/4 of the American workers have either experienced or witnessed bullying in the workplace. And if it was defined better or with more clarity, I dare say that 100% of the workers would say that they experienced it or witnessed it.
Or witnessed it. So what kind of spurred me to put this show together was the NFL scandal about bullying. And, you know, it came out that one player bullied another player. I'm not up on football, so I can't quote who these players are. But then several weeks later we hear, well, you know what, the coach told me to bully the person. So talk about that dynamic.
Well, that was an interesting case. That took place in the Miami Dolphins locker room. Being a lifelong New York Jets fan, I followed this with interest. And what happened was one or more players bullied Jonathan Martin, another player. They bullied him, they threatened him, they called him names, epithets. They called him racial epithets. He's African American. They did just about everything you could do to bully someone. The NFL, to its credit, did a very thorough investigation of what took place, issued a very, very lengthy report on the investigation. What it found was, yes, these events took place. Yes, everything that Jonathan Martin claimed did take place. But what I found interesting, and I wrote in my blog about this, was looking at the bibliography of what the investigators looked at to understand what bullying was, to understand the rules against bullying, etc. There were no legal sources, no case books, no cases, no legal scholars. It was all either sociological tracts, psychological studies, surveys, etc. And I wrote in my blog, which got a lot of responses, that without a protected class being implicated here, without being bullied for being of a certain race or a certain gender or a certain age, bullying just falls by itself. There's no law. And in fact, the professor who authored the Healthy Workplace Bill, which has been introduced in 25 states, Professor Yamada, actually wrote in to me and said the fact that the NFL, in doing the investigation, couldn't cite any legal source for its investigation, for the background, just shows the inadequacy of the laws that we have now in terms of bullying.
Right. Now, I know that in the reading I've done and in our discussions, harassment and bullying kind of blend together. So when someone is bullied, can they say they've been harassed and then fall under the laws?
Well, the definitions, as you say, and as you point out, are very blurry here. Mm-hmm. Sexual harassment, racial harassment, those have definitions. The law is pretty clear that you cannot be treated in the workplace, which is what we're talking about now, yes, in an adverse manner, so as to create a hostile workplace for you based on your race, your gender, your age, etc. Okay? But the word harassment by itself really has no meaning legally, just as bullying has no meaning legally, not yet. And therefore, the two are used sort of interchangeably.
Now, with bullying and I guess harassment, because they kind of blend together, in all the reading and case law I've seen, it's when a superior inflicts either the harassment, the bullying, the sexual abuse, whatever. But what happens in a workplace? Two people are working together, and one bullies the other. What recourse is there? Well,
the fact that you say that it's a superior bullying, a subordinate,
right,
just shows how we don't have the same definitions even. It's so vague, because in a broad definition of bullying, it doesn't matter from whom the bullying comes. It could be the boss, it could be a coworker, it could be a subordinate. Mm-hmm. The point is, it's not the issue is not who is doing it, but that in the workplace, someone is harassing, someone is bullying someone else. Mm-hmm. Someone is creating a miserable experience for that person.
Mm-hmm. So if one were bullied, and you were representing, you weren't on the corporate side, the management side, but you were on the employee side, and an employee comes to you and says, you know, I'm being bullied, and if you investigate it and you say, okay, you know what, you're being harassed, would that the route you would take for recourse?
Well,
because there is no workplace bullying?
Well, if someone came to me and said, if I was representing employees, I've been harassed or I've been bullied.
Right.
It's the same thing, at least in New York, as if they said to me, I've been unfairly let go from work. Mm-hmm. There is no recourse in New York for that.
Right.
Unless you can show, the employee can show that they were harassed, bullied, fired, or otherwise treated adversely in the workplace, mm-hmm, based upon some protected class of which they're a member. Again, it could be their race, their gender, their age, their pregnancy status, disability. If it doesn't fall into one of those categories, there's really no recourse. Of course, if a bully in the workplace or any place physically touches or assaults someone, mm-hmm, they could sue them for battery, they could, mm-hmm, report them to the police as committing a criminal act, but short of that, there's really little recourse.
Let's talk about why, how, and who does the bullying. So, bullying is driven by, as I understand it, a need to control.
Well, this goes well beyond the law, well, right, beyond my ken as a lawyer, but you and I have read up on this, and within the realm of psychology and sociology, most people believe that bullies, one, have a need to control. They have a need to control the situation. One way to control is to intimidate. And they do so to perpetuate their own agenda. They don't do it for some legitimate business reason, meaning that they don't commit what's really an inappropriate act of bullying in furtherance of something that may be legitimate. It's for their own personal agenda. Idiosyncratic, neurotic, psychopathic perhaps, but their own agenda. The need to control for some personal agenda they have.
What should employers be looking for and looking at? Because in the research that I've done, bullying starts almost harmless, and then it kind of escalates. And then usually at the end of the road of bullying, you find out because so-and-so was getting promotion, but the bullier wanted it, so they kind of knock them out of the box so they can get, there's usually a reason why somebody is bullying. So how does an employer, the vision to see what is going on? Well,
it's a tough thing for an employer. And what I would do, as I do advising employers, is advise them as to bullying as I would as to sexual harassment or racial harassment. When doing training of employers, I would use the same sort of training. And I would say, one, you have to understand your own workplace, the culture of your workplace. If you don't know what it is, then you can't really do very much about it. Perhaps get someone in, a neutral observer, to observe what's going on. You have to have some people call it a zero tolerance attitude for any sort of harassment, bullying, or inappropriate behavior. My blog, I suggested that there should be zero tolerance for harassment or bullying. And from the thousands of readers, all of whom are people in the business, either lawyers who do employment law or HR, human resource people, all knowledgeable, I couldn't get a consensus. Some people said, and no one condoned, of course, bullying. Everyone decried it, but I couldn't get a consensus as to whether we should have laws, whether we should have rules, whether we should have workplace surveillance to make sure there's no bullying. Some people said yes. Some people said, how do we define it? How do we prevent it? How do we prevent people from just interacting in the workplace, which is helpful and helps productivity? Could not get a consensus.
And what people think that should be done.
And these are the people who are in charge of the workplace.
Right. Now, the bullying that I've witnessed, sometimes it starts as under the guise of harmless fooling around.
Right.
As if it was in the playground and harmless pushing around. But so the target in the beginning really doesn't get it that it's bullying until it escalates.
Well, I'm not sure that the target doesn't get it. I have a feeling that the target, the bullying target, probably has been bullied before, maybe from childhood, and probably has very, very exquisitely tuned antenna to figure out that he or she's been bullied. But in any event, you're right. It starts with little jokes, little pranks, and unless these pranks, jokes, epithets, personal little teasing, unless there's some racial or sexual or other prohibited characteristic, it's hard to forbid it. It's hard to prevent it. It's hard to police it. What do? You tell people you can't make jokes. You can't tease someone. You can't tell someone, hey, I heard that the Miami Dolphins lost to the Jets yesterday, and tease them about that. And that's where the human resource people who responded to my blog articles differed. They didn't know what to do in the workplace. They don't want to make the workplace sterile and inhuman, but they want to prohibit people from hurting each other.
There's a morning radio talk show that I really don't listen to, but getting ready for this show, I've been listening to a lot of things, and I won't name the talk show, but the main host, there are several people that are on this morning show, and then there's the boss, the head show. And he always puts someone down one way or the other, but with a chuckle, and then everyone around the table chuckles. But now that I'm so aware of the topic we're speaking of, in my opinion, he bullies these people. and they're probably afraid to say something, and they laugh about it, and but it. Personally, now I think it's a terrible thing, and they, other listeners maybe that are not tuned into bullying just think, oh well, it's just fun. But in my opinion, it's not.
Well, again, you don't know it's bullying until you talk to the target, the person who's the subject of this. And
it's all of them at one point or another. It's not just one person.
Right. And perhaps you read in the paper, I read this in the Times last week, that a study was done by some medical doctors, and they found that people who are the target of bullying show a marked increase in their C-reactive protein, which is a marker for inflammation of the cardiovascular system, and therefore it shows when someone has a higher risk of heart disease and heart attack. And one of the research study doctors said that the only other type of behavior that he has seen which creates such a marked increase in this particular enzyme in the blood is when a child is physically or mentally abused. That's how serious bullying can be to children or adults, that it could actually cause physical harm and even death.
Well, and that's interesting because I've been thinking that perhaps a bullier has been bullied in his or her lifetime. And there is a certain politician who I'm convinced has been bullied in his lifetime and comes across as a bully.
I haven't seen any studies on that, but I'd be willing to wager you're absolutely correct. Just as people who are perpetrators of acts against children have had those acts perpetrated against them when they were children. People who are alcoholics frequently came from alcoholic families. I would be willing to wager you that these unnamed bullies and this particular politician, most likely, when they were children, were bullied.
Yes.
This is their way of...
it's a defense system.
Exactly.
It's a defense system.
Exactly.
It's a survival instinct.
Right.
I also read that bullying is akin to domestic violence. It's actually on that level also.
No question about it. No question about it. That's a whole different issue, of course. That's treated perhaps less seriously, to the extent it's treated at all, because unfortunately the powers that be in our society, the leaders, the police, think that what happens in the home should really go untouched or at least uninvestigated. It's all consensual. This is husband and wife. It's personal business. It's not.
No.
Anytime someone is abused, it's dangerous, it's damaging, it's life-threatening, no matter where it is, in a marriage, in a family, in a workplace.
And a lot of times an innocent person gets caught in the crossfire.
Well, that's always the case too.
We see that in the news all the time. Let's talk about the difference between vertical bullying and horizontal bullying.
Okay.
Okay? So vertical bullying is up and down the ladder by a superior. And horizontal bullying is, I'm going to bully you. We work together, and I want your office. I'm going to bully you right the heck out of there.
Right.
So how does an employer deal with this? Because the superior, but then there's someone on top of this person, assumingly. So somebody on top is looking down and watching what's going on.
Right. Well, again, just as I counsel employers as to prohibited sexual harassment or racial harassment, they have to know the culture of their workplace, and they have to, from the top down, create a culture that is not going to accept any harassment, sexual, racial, or just bullying. The workplace should have policies against this. There should be employee handbooks that are distributed. By example, employers, management should show the employees that they're not going to tolerate this, they're not going to perpetrate this, certainly. If a subordinate is bullied by his or her boss, unless the boss is the ultimate boss, let's say the owner, then that boss should be disciplined for it. If the owner's doing it, well, the company could likely be liable for that, almost in an absolute sense, if the ultimate boss is committing something that is actionable.
What I found, looking back on my career and realizing, good, clean fun really was not good, clean fun. It was bullying. But I've seen people go to HR and absolutely nothing happens because they are afraid to go to the superior because perhaps it's the HR's boss,
right,
or it's the boss of whomever was doing this.
Right.
So what kind of safeguards should be put in place? What would you tell your corporate clients?
Right.
How you can preserve the integrity of the person who's being targeted?
Right. Well, if it was a prohibited form of harassment,
Mm-hmm.
let's say sexual harassment,
Mm-hmm.
which by law is prohibited, has a definition and is prohibited, I would have policies in place in the workplace that someone who is the subject, the victim of this sexual harassment, can either speak to HR or speak to someone else other than the harasser, if that harasser happens to be his or her boss.
Right.
There should be a neutral person, someone that someone can go to report this. Because if they do report this and nothing takes place, nothing happens, there's no investigation, then the company can be liable. Mm-hmm. When it comes to bullying, I would do the same thing. Although you can't sue the company if you're just being bullied and it has no, again, sexual, racial, or other type of component that's prohibited. Nonetheless, people who are bullied know their rights, and it doesn't take very much to carve out a claim that the reason they were bullied was, again, because of their race or their gender or something. Mm-hmm. So the company could be sued, even unsuccessfully, if they don't have policies in place, don't investigate, make sure that they have remedies in place, make sure if the act of bullying has been substantiated, that the bullier gets removed from the situation, if not terminated if it's serious enough, that there has to be employer involvement.
What is happening on the legislative level? Let's talk about what should happen and what is happening, because in the research I've done, the things just kind of hit the wall. The Senate had a bill, the House had a bill, and like everything else that goes on there, it just hits the wall and nothing's been happening. But
right.
So what should be happening and what is happening?
Well, you're right. The Congress right now is relatively dysfunctional, so I don't think we're going to see any anti-bullying bills coming out of Congress. But every state could pass their own version of it. And again, I mentioned before that Professor Yamada from Suffolk Law School drafted what is the template for bills that were introduced in 25 state legislatures, none of which, including New York, have been passed, or New Jersey too. Mm-hmm. My prediction is eventually, and sooner rather than later, you'll see one or two states pass laws like this, like the Healthy Workplace Bill of Professor Yamada, and it'll then spread like wildfire in terms of being passed in other states. This is the next real action that will and should be taken.
I know that there was one court case, and the judge said, it's a quote, in what can only be described as an extremely bullying manner. And then he said, although the frequency and seriousness of the verbal abuse of the manager by the staff member, so this is the other way around, the manager was bullied by the staff member, was disputed, there was no doubt that there was persistent offensive bullying. So what happens when it's the other way around? The staff member in this particular court case was bullying the manager. What does the manager do?
Well,
again, there's no definition.
There's no definition.
There's no definition.
And I don't know what case that is, but if that was a sexual harassment case, let's say.
They brought it in for bullying, actually. They definitely brought this in. It's McCowan versus New Type Accessories.
You know where that was?
Let me see.
In the United States?
Oh, definitely in the United States. Definitely
there are bullying laws, anti-bullying laws that have recently been passed in Australia and New Zealand, which people who study bullying now are looking to as perhaps the model to see if it works. It's just taken effect. The idea is to create a commission to study the situation and to prevent bullying and to issue what they call stop bullying orders. So the experts are looking to Australia as possibly an example of what could be done.
Well, since it's Australia, you think there'll be some sort of international committee on bullying?
Well, there's a lot of international committees on everything, but I don't think that's going to affect the workplace in the United States. I think each state's going to have to look to other places that have had successful laws on subjects and make their own decisions.
Make their own decisions. Politically, yeah. I don't think that people realize how serious bullying in the workplace is and can be, and how important it is for our Congress to do something about it.
Right. Well, I'll tell you, in studying about Australia, I noted that the legislature there, the parliament, found that bullying takes a toll on the workplace, not only in terms of the health of employees, but in terms of productivity, in terms of distractions, and they quantified it as affecting business to the tune of over $30 billion a year in one small country.
Wow, wow.
If we extrapolate from that, perhaps it might be close to $500 billion what bullying costs the American economy.
Now, the states, I know some of the states, I think 17 or 19 states have passed some sort of anti-bullying. No, they haven't?
No, not a single one.
Not a single one. So
no, it's been introduced in 25 states. It's been voted down or tabled every time.
Why do you think that's so?
Unclear. No state wants to try something new, tries to experiment. Certainly with the workplace, because the dynamics of the workplace are such that you have interest groups and pressure